I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. We are here on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I want to talk about that. I always like to ensure, I think it's important that everyone understand the full legacy of MLK, the radical legacy of MLK, the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. was not a beloved and popular figure when he was alive. People thought he was asking for too much, that MLK was assassinated with, at the very least, the acquiescence of the entire white supremacist structure in this country, which includes parts of the government or large swaths of the government. The full radical legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. is critical to remember, more critical than ever, probably, in this new age of Trump. MLK didn't have a dream of harmony, and then everyone was like, hey, that's a good idea. We should do that. There was struggle. There were losses. There was violence and bloodshed. John Lewis had his head bashed in by a sheriff who had lined up the law enforcement at that time just to fight against equal rights for African Americans in this country. And MLK was murdered, assassinated, lost his life in the struggle for civil rights. And now we're in an age where Donald Trump is going to be president in 4 days. The man he's nominated to be the top law enforcement agent in this country, Jeff Beauregard Sessions, had a letter written about him by MLK's wife, how he shouldn't get a judgeship, which he didn't get because he's so racist, that he was too racist for a judgeship in the 1980s. And now this man is supposed to enforce the civil rights enforcement that comes from all of the gains that MLK made through struggle and hardship, through the fact that the entire apparatus of the U.S. government was oftentimes aimed at him. It's important to remember in this age of Trump, brought to us in part, first, I'll state, brought to us because the Democrats did not fight hard enough to show that they were on the side of the people, but also brought to us in part by the head of the FBI, James Comey, and a splinter faction within the FBI that did everything they could to deliver the White House to Donald Trump. Remember that there was another time when the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, was playing all sorts of domestic politics, including wiretapping Martin Luther King Jr., those wiretaps signed off by Bobby Kennedy, just in case you were wondering, by Bobby Kennedy. And J. Edgar Hoover wiretapped Martin Luther King Jr., and then he actually blackmailed him. The FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the top law enforcement agency in the land, the entire weight of the federal government was put on in a blackmailing fashion, MLK, to kill himself. That is the legacy of MLK. MLK did not, as I said, have a beautiful dream of harmony that everyone then agreed to. He fought against all of the powers arrayed against him. And yes, change happened, but it was not overnight. It was not easy. There was blood spilled in the street, not just MLK's. James Reeb, a minister at the church that I attend here in Washington, D.C., All Souls Unitarian, he went down. There was a call for people of faith to fight against the racist segregation, the empowerment, the legal empowerment of white supremacy in this country. And he was murdered for that. James Reeb was. And he was one of many people whose names are, James Reeb's name has not been forgotten, actually. We hold up his name at All Souls with the Reeb Voting Rights Project. But there's so many people who were in the struggle whose names aren't remembered. And everything they fought for is under threat right now. That's not an exaggeration. They just gutted the Voting Rights Act in the last Congress, and now Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions is going to be in charge of enforcing civil rights around the country. I mean, we are in a position where every person of conscience needs to stand up, needs to fight back, needs to understand that all of these fights are connected, that all of these fights are actually part of splitting us apart so that we can't stand in solidarity together against a global oligarchy hell-bent on stealing everything we have. And once they're finished stealing our money, they'll steal our health and our lives. And that's why this fight over health reform, healthcare and Obamacare and the destruction of Medicare and Medicaid, it's related to the gutting of the Voting Rights Act and getting Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions in there so that he won't enforce any of this. The voter suppression that we saw that also ushered Donald into the White House. This is all one fight. It is the few against the many, and we have to fight back if we're going to have any chance to have a future that we want to live in, that we want to see for our children and our grandchildren. This was my rant. I'm coming back after this break, and it's all calls for the rest of the show. We want to talk to you about what you're doing to fight back. We want to talk about what happened yesterday in the fight back. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we will be right back after this.